On today's episode of the CHGO Cubs podcast, the Cubs drop both games in Japan. Spring training resumes later this afternoon, and now we're less than a week away from the other opening day. We'll talk about it all and more on today's episode of the CHGO Cubs podcast. This is the CHGO Cubs podcast. My name is Corey. I am joined, as always, by Brendan, and we are coming to you on Friday. It is March 21st. And Brendan, as I warned you when we spoke last, there was a distinct possibility the Cubs would be 0-2, and we just had to stew on that for a week, and stew we shall.
The silver lining is I didn't have to watch most of the game. I was not up at 3 a.m. I was up at 4:30 a.m. Now, was I happy with the outcome? Absolutely not. Did I almost skip work? I almost did. But we got one more week. We got more spring training to at least get back to some normalcy. Then 160 more games and 160 more possibilities to be a little disappointed. Many more games, Corey. We got 6 more months of this.
Does it make you feel better to remember that when the Cubs open in Arizona next Thursday, they'll start with Zach Gallen and Corbin Burns? Do you feel better now?
Well, I didn't know about that until you just mentioned it. But you know what? Maybe going back to the States will unlock a lot of energy from them.
Yeah, so we'll get into all of it. Obviously, the Cubs lose both games to the Dodgers in Japan. They lose 4-1 on opening day, 6-3 in the second game, falling to Yoshinobu Yamamoto and the debuting rookie Roki Sasaki. Shota, Justin Steele get those starts. We'll talk about it all. As you guys, if you've listened to us for any number of time, oddly, Brendan, even though this is a Friday episode, we technically are lined up really nicely for a series recap. Like, you and I are kind of familiar with over the years. So we'll talk about these games. We'll break them down. But, did just want to start like generally, Brendan, obviously the season started a very weird circumstance that we're all not used to, that the Cubs played 2 games, they're 0-2, but later today they have a spring training game. It's an odd way to go about things.
It's odd, but at the same time, how much meaningfulness do you extract from this? Likely almost none.
Nothing.
The lasting memory I'll have is you and I will be talking about this years from now and be like, remember when we woke up at 3 a.m. to be watching those games?
Yeah.
And it will be a funny, distant memory, but the actual meaningfulness, not much.
Yeah. And we'll get into that. The lasting memory for me actually came kind of late in the trip, and it was the picture of Mark Pryor and Kerry Wood that has me wanting to, I got to rethink my whole life after looking at that photo. So that was my lasting image.
I mean, I'm trying to get myself in a positive mood. I didn't we were bringing down the mood. You got Zach Gallen in the D-backs, looming now. Mark Pryor and Kerry Wood. Come on, give me something positive. Something.
No. So no. I think just generally, look, it's a weird circumstance, and certainly make no excuses for the outcomes of these 2 particular games. The Dodgers were playing in the same circumstances. So, all of the stuff about it being early, I don't mention that to write off these 2 games, or, they do count. They're losses that unfortunately are banked now that the Cubs, go into the rest of this season having. But it's a week and a half, 2 weeks before these guys are normally playing. They have to travel across the country. The Dodgers are very good. Also, after it was opening day though, Brendan. So getting up at 5 a.m. to watch that performance, obviously not what people were hoping.
Did you go to sleep, or did you just stay up through the night?
I took a nap after. Yeah,
Okay.
I did.
Okay.
I had to. Yeah.
Okay.
I'm not a morning guy. I work in a different time zone, so there was no way I was gutting out that whole day. But I think overall, I just bring that up because I was, even listening to Ben Zobrist, who did a great interview with our guys Cody Delmendo and Luke Stuckmeyer earlier this week. If you didn't watch that, check that out with Ben Zobrist. And he talked about like it's a real challenge for these guys physically and mentally to go from spring training to getting up for real games amidst all the hoopla of traveling over to Japan and this being the opening day. And of course, how big these games felt in Japan to those fans and with a lot of those players. And then coming back, bringing it back down, continuing your work and, getting yourself ready for actually the day-to-day every day, 9 inning, 160, games to go in this season. So that's the only reason I bring this up is I can't take too much away from these games because it's just a little unorthodox and it's a little out there and it's 2 baseball games. Like I just don't, I think, as Luke Stuckmeyer always says, I'm not going to tell you how to fan. If you got up at 5 a.m. and you're pissed off watching those games, I'm not going to tell you not to be. I didn't enjoy being up at 5 a.m. 2 days in a row, but I think I have
2 days in a row.
I have seen a lot of overreaction in the Cubs sphere to 2 baseball games, 2 weeks ahead of schedule in another country against the defending World Series champions. And even though Freddie and Mookie weren't in these games, Brendan, like Yamamoto, if you watch that game, I shouldn't have to explain to you that he's really good and has really good stuff. Roki, obviously, a little wild his first game, but like still clearly really good stuff. This might be, when healthy, the Dodgers, one of the best rosters we've ever seen, like in our life. So to me, it's like big deal. They lost these 2 games. This doesn't tell us anything about the 2025 Chicago Cubs, other than they lost 2 games to start the season in Japan.
What I learned from the 2 games, even though it doesn't mean much in the grand scheme, what I learned was, number one, Craig Counsell's impression of Matt Shaw offensively might be higher than you and I discussed, him batting 5th. We'll get into that.
Sure.
The second is looking at how Shota and Justin pitched. Are there shape differences? Are there huge mechanical differences? We'll get into that. The third is how he deployed his bullpen. What does it mean for Ben Brown that he pitched significant innings? How does that contrast with decisions looming about Eli Morgan and Ben Brown and Brad Keller and the back end of the rotation? So we did learn a lot of information about these 2 games and the future roster. It doesn't mean that because Kyle Tucker hit a double off the wall and not a home run that we should interpret this as bad. It doesn't mean that then by losing by a few runs because we have fans reaching over the stands is indicative of their doom and gloom. Absolutely not. But there are important trends that we should discuss, especially the most recent pressing roster decisions that will be looming.
Yeah, and on Thursday, we did get the decision that the Cubs have optioned Eli Morgan and Jordan Wicks, so we will talk about that, the implications of that. Of course, over the last several weeks, we've kind of hinted, and maybe not so much in Wicks, but certainly Eli Morgan, like, would they use that option? So shouldn't be a surprise to see it, but interesting, where he pitched in the game the other day. And we talked about, would they send down a guy that they traded for and that had been a good MLB reliever to give someone else a chance of like, hey, you either prove it or we're getting Eli Morgan back up. So we'll talk about that, but I want to finish, kind of on these 2 games and stuff. And, look, if 5 months from now, we're looking at this team and it's like, yeah, man, similar movie to the last couple of years, failing with runners in scoring position or problems in the bullpen or starters not going deep. Maybe that's the case, but we didn't learn that in these 2 games, and you can't be confident of that in these 2 games. So again, I shared everybody's frustration. I didn't enjoy those 2 games. You guys, for any number of time, if you've listened to Brendan and I, you know how I feel about the Los Angeles Dodgers in particular. So really none of this was pleasant or enjoyable to sit through and watch. And, opening day is a big deal, like for a lot of us. It's something we celebrate, something we look forward to. And, for this to kind of be the start of the Cubs season, trust me, I get why people are frustrated, concerned, etc. And as I've said to you, Brendan, like I also don't blame people that don't want to give this franchise any benefit of the doubt, coming off 2 83-win seasons with very similar problems, things they wanted adjusted in the offseason that didn't happen, more quotes from Tom Ricketts. Like I'm not going to blame you, but I do think it is incorrect to try and draw significant conclusions about the team from 2 baseball games. I think that is not something as a group we should be doing. And you can't confidently take anything from these games. Maybe it'll be proven right in time, but we didn't learn that in these 2 games. So I would say take a breath. 160 games is a very long time. And, if unfortunately, you read some of the stuff, Brendan, and you would think that no team has ever lost 2 games to start the season and ever been any good or done anything, fun to, and it's like, come on, y'all. Again, I get it. I understand. Like, I'm not, throwing people under the bus or anything, but some of it that was out there, I was like, guys, it's 2 games, 2 weeks early across the world against the best team in baseball. Like, whatever. Guys look healthy. That's what
Thank
matters.
God.
Yeah.
I remember putting myself back in opening day last year when Steele hurt his hamstring, and I'm having a panic attack on my couch thinking he's out for the year. I thought he tore his hamstring. So we are healthy. That's a fantastic point. The second point is daylight savings time just happened. I'm still recovering from the time zone change, for real. So for them going, it was 16 hours and then playing through that is very challenging.
Yeah.
And second, or rather last, it's 2 games. Zoom out. Have to zoom out.
Yeah.
They'll be playing games literally 6 months from now. 6 months from now, they will have 8 more games remaining. Half a year from now. So many decisions will be made. So many performances will be ironed out. This roster right now is unlikely to look like it in 3 months, let alone 6 months. We have a lot to discuss, and there's really encouraging trends along the way, even dating back to the start of spring training that is continuing through these 2 games in Japan.
Yeah, I mean, I think you and I are, in lockstep there. Again, like I understand people have been frustrated with this team for years and stuff, and like fan how you want, but I think some of the stuff that I saw and was reading and hearing was quite an overreaction for 2 games to start the season, and in this context especially. Let's talk about Shota and Steele, though. We're gonna hit our first ad break in a second, so let's come back and we'll talk about that. But leading into it, like that was one of the things that was the most important for me. As I said, like to you, if we had seen Shota sitting at 89 miles an hour, like that's the type of thing that maybe does tell us something about the 2025 season.
And even then, it's like, still
sure, he still has a week, to get himself ready, and it's April, whatever. But I thought he looked good, looked healthy, stuff looked good. Obviously, the walks a bit uncharacteristic, some, really bad calls in both of these games, but oh well. That was my main takeaway is he looked good. They both looked ready. Obviously not the start that Steele, would have hoped to have. Again, is it different if he gets that call to Hernandez? Whatever, crying over spilled milk. So that was my main takeaways. Guys looking healthy. The one thing I will say, Brendan, that was especially frustrating about the first game, and, again, like they weren't playing with their regular second baseman. They have a guy making his debut at third base who looked a lot better defensively the second game. But just like on like those particular errors, like that was the one thing where I was like, guys, we've talked about this so much. You cannot be the team that's making more mistakes than the other team, especially when you're playing the Los Angeles Dodgers. And it didn't come down to those 2 throws or whatever, but we talked about it so much over the last few years, Brendan, like margins, winning those little battles, taking more outs, not giving away more outs, taking more bases, not getting thrown out on those little things. And so for that first game to be like, okay, we're going to gift the Dodgers some extra opportunities. We're walking a bunch of guys. We're walking the 9-hitter in front of Shohei Ohtani. We're throwing the ball away. Please, let's not do that. That was the one thing that stood out. If I'm going to just look at these games, in a vacuum as singular baseball games, that was something in that first game where I was like, guys, can't be doing this. Let's knock this out here in Japan. And when we get back here to Arizona, let's be the team that is taking those extra mistakes, not giving them away.
I'll be honest with you. I do not care. I really don't. And I understand.
I'm saying I'm looking at the one game and not drawing any conclusion for it.
I know you're not drawing. I know you're not drawing conclusions. We had discussions last year about Dansby's defense for the first 2 weeks, him throwing baseballs in the dirt. Yeah. People thought he was done, and he still became a 4-win player. As I've gotten older watching games, doing this with you for now 10 years, legit 10 years, my patience threshold is much larger for seeing performances, but also shorter for how fans react. And I don't mean to upset folks who are genuinely upset about watching those errors, but I remind myself that when I'm similarly upset, I'm kind of overreacting and I'm getting myself worked up, and a lot of my fears and anxieties never come to fruition. When we were doing podcasts earlier on in like 2017, 2018, I would dial in on such stupid things. You know that. And a lot of it was just worthless. It was not even worth the energy nor the time, but I dialed in on that. As I've aged, got more gray hairs, I realized let things flow. Let things work itself out. These are human beings, and the team is going to change, as is most of these guys' performances.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I'm not suggesting that they're going to do that throughout the year. I'm just saying for a singular game, we just talked about.
We've seen a lot of crazy stuff in singular games. It's just how baseball's just a dumb sport. It's the stupidest sport in the world.
That's what happens when they take 2 games and then come back and play spring training. That's what I said, Brendan. We're left to stew with these 2 games. So that's what
this is
what
such a stupid. This league is so stupid. Yeah. It's so stupid, but so.
Let's hit our first ad break here, and then we're going to get our first pitch doctor breakdown of the year. We're going to talk about Shota. We're going to talk about Justin Steele. And, we'll continue talking roster moves, the lineup, and getting ready for domestic opening.
There we go. Okay, Toyota. Did I read it was snowing in Chicago recently, Corey, or did I just?
You were right about that.
It was. Okay, listen. It's still brutal. The winter can be brutal. It currently is brutal, but Toyota helps make it easier. They have 25 vehicles with available all-wheel drive and 4-wheel drive, and they have more than any other auto brand. The Toyota Tundra is a truck that's known for its power, durability, and even off-road capabilities, and it's perfect for those snowy Chicago winters. If you're headed to a big game, the spacious Grand Highlander is the perfect ride with all-wheel drive to keep you and yours safe. They also have more, again, than any other auto brand, so bring the action, and Toyota will bring the traction. Toyota, let's go places. Speaking of let's go places, Waymo is an autonomous ride-hailing service that operates in the Phoenix metro area. These cars entirely drive themselves, only using cameras, LiDAR, and radar. Over the past few years, their service has grown to serve a majority of the Phoenix Valley and provides a safer, more eco-friendly ride-hailing service for everyday consumers. They have over 150,000 trips per week across Phoenix, also San Fran and Los Angeles. Waymo was the first company to serve a fully autonomous ride with no human behind the wheel back 10 years ago in 2015. They now have over 40 million miles of real-world driving experience, and that's enough to drive to the moon and back 80 times. If you're headed out to Arizona to catch the last few games, even going to opening day at Chase Field, download the Waymo app, the Waymo One app, and get ready to experience the future.
All right, Brendan, let's bring it back in. And, if you're watching on YouTube, that's what we need. We need our guy, John Lester, there. Throw us a like if you're watching. We appreciate it. Let's talk about the starting pitchers in this series. Obviously, Justin Steele, Shota Imanaga going to play a pivotal role in the success or failure of the Chicago Cubs 2025 season. On opening day, it was Shota, 4 innings, no hits, no runs, 4 walks, and 2 strikeouts. Again, as I mentioned, the walks obviously uncharacteristic like that for Shota. He does that all on 69 pitches. What did you think of the debut here from Shota Imanaga?
Yeah, Shota, I thought, basically showed what we saw in 2024. The fastball had carry, had life on it. We saw a lot of the splitters that made him look phenomenal last year. He also showed some sweepers, so the repertoire was essentially the same. I think early on, we want to see some of the command dialed in, but to your point, when guys make their first few starts, I am principally looking at velocity. Does velocity go down 2 miles per hour? Because that's kind of a recent, not maybe a long-lasting effect, but more of a recent effect. So the velocity for Shota, Corey, 92.5 miles per hour. The velocity average last season, 91.5 miles an hour. So he's throwing about 1 mile per hour faster. So that right there to me signals he's healthy, maybe a little adrenaline being in Japan, playing in the Tokyo Dome, wanting to put on a show, opening up for one of the biggest franchises in the world for the Cubs. And I thought he looked mostly good. The command needs to be dialed in, as he showed a lot last season, and I don't have much concerns.
Yeah, I agree. I thought he looked good. I was happy for him, obviously not the result that he wanted. I'm sure he wanted to go deeper in the game and, the team to get a win.
He's still stretched out.
Yeah, but, he didn't give up any runs, didn't give up any hits. I'm sure he was upset with the walks, but, even again, without Mookie and Freddie, this is a tough Dodger lineup. We know that they're an OBP team. So, they're a tough lineup to get through. And if your command isn't good, they're a bad team to have that happen against because they're very good at taking those walks.
The one thing with Shota, not to interject there, but the one thing with Shota, the fastball was slightly more leaky. And not within a crazy distribution. He showed this at times last year. But when you mentioned the walks and the command, I believe maybe some of the reasons for the walks was just because he had a little bit more run on that fastball. And again, that's not an outlier thing. He did do that at times last year, but in this specific scenario, that may be one thing he's trying to work on going forward. I have no idea. We never talked to him, but just straightening out that fastball.
Sure. All right. So, let's stick in the first game, if you don't mind, instead of moving to Justin Steele.
Whatever you want to do.
And let's talk about Ben Brown next. So Ben Brown comes in, goes 2 2/3, 4 hits, 3 runs, 2 of them earned, 3 walks, and 5 strikeouts. So it was a bit of everything from Ben Brown. He threw some really good pitches, and the command was also not there for him, obviously, at times. The thing that stood out, I think, to a lot of people was the length that he was in this game. And if that is, there were reports before they went to Japan that he was a candidate to get one of those rotation spots. And, seeing him not in a particularly short outing, especially given the command issues, might suggest that Craig Counsell and Tommy were thinking, we're not going to get him up and have him pitch 3 batters. I forget the rule even exists. And sit him down. We need him to be in the habit of getting up, sitting back down, going back for another inning, sitting down, doing another inning. Maybe we shouldn't be reading into that, et cetera. But, given the way that played out and given the high hopes that they obviously have for Ben Brown, I think that was interesting. And again, obviously not the start that he wanted, maybe a little jittery, the adrenaline running a bit opening day, playing in the Tokyo Dome. This isn't a guy that has a ton of MLB experience, obviously. So this, certainly potentially a venue that maybe the adrenaline or nerves or anything like that can get the best of you a little bit. But given how he was coming into this offseason, the injury that he was dealing with, et cetera, like seeing him out there, seeing him healthy, seeing him pitch the 2 2/3, and even with the walks, the strikeouts look real nice, and he threw some really nice looking pitches. So I'm looking forward to what else Ben Brown is doing in this 2025 season.
For sure. So 2 things stand out. Number 1, 65 pitches. Second thing is curveball usage. So he threw mostly curveballs. And last year, he averaged a curveball once every 3 pitches, about a 35% usage rate. Against the Dodgers the opening day, that was his dominant pitch type. He threw a curveball 55% of the time. So he threw over 32 curveballs. That is not insane, but it's indicative of what the Cubs are maybe thinking Ben Brown can be. Drew Smyly threw mostly curveballs and said he was a dominant curveball, not a dominant fastball guy. I'm not saying Ben Brown may do that because his fastball has a lot of life, but to see him throw more curveballs and fastballs was really interesting to me, especially because he threw 65 pitches. To me, there's only one logical conclusion from those 2 traits. The first is he's going to be starting, Corey. I don't think you have him throw 65 pitches if you don't have him starting within the first month. Maybe not the first week or the second week, but I imagine the first month. And that's because Javier Assad's not pitching right now. Brad Keller, who we've heard a lot about, is throwing short stints. So he's throwing higher velocity, not being stretched out. Craig Counsell even explicitly said his role may be different. So I'm reconciling all the information we have, how he performed, with me thinking he's going to be starting. And I like that, and I'm quite surprised because I thought they would try to slowly bring him back in after those bone tumors in his neck. And I thought they would give Brad Keller a chance at the rotation. I thought Colin Ray, the veteran, would be given the first chance, and they would slowly build Brown up, but he's exceeding my expectations health-wise.
Yeah. Well, and maybe that's still how they do it. It may be that, we see Boyd and Ray get the first go and they, see how they feel like going through the rest of that first month. Again, there's still more they can do with some of these guys that have options, don't have options. Sure. I would imagine that they
may go to Iowa and he still may be stretched out. But the fact is he's not being shortened. Yes. So that to me is interesting.
Yeah. It would have been a lot more telling if he threw 15 pitches and then it would have been a bit of a deviation. So anyway, excited for what Ben Brown can bring. I think if you can, as we've discussed with a lot of these guys over the last years, having high potential starter is always worth pursuing. I feel like we've talked about a lot of these guys for the Cubs in the past where maybe they were going to be in a longish relief role. Maybe they were going to be starting. Maybe what if they just did 1 inning at a time and maxed out? And, Ben has obviously been in that category since he's joined the Cubs and in the time that he's been at the majors. But if he's healthy and you're able to get him stretched out and give him an opportunity as a starter, like obviously his stuff is great. And if they can execute that and he does succeed in that role, it's obviously extremely valuable.
It does make sense. And I think if I had to guess what Counsell's thinking, it's how do you give the most innings to the best pitchers? It's a simple rule. But it's one where in history, we've seen managers try to balance that truth with leverage and sacrificing bulk innings to hit certain situational leverage points. And I think the way I've changed thinking about that over the years is almost how I look at the top 5 lineup spots. You want to give your best hitters the top 4 spots in the lineup, right? Just because those are the guys who are likely going to get the most run production opportunities. For the pitching, it's very similar. You want to give your best pitchers who are capable of being having stamina the most opportunities to prevent runs. And if Ben Brown is healthy and stretched out, it makes all the sense in the world to give him 4 innings at one time, 5 innings at one time, because those may be the best use of his innings.
Yeah. All right. So let's talk about Justin Steele, your opening day starter last year, your number 2 starter this year in Japan. Also 4 innings, 5 hits, 5 runs, all of them earned, just 1 walk, 5 strikeouts, and 2 home runs allowed in this one for Justin Steele. Obviously, not the opening day that he was hoping for. So, one of these days he'll have, his first start of the year, be some, he'll throw a Maddox or something like that. I'm sure we're building up to that. But what did you think of Justin? Similarly, I know you're going to dig into some of the data, but just in terms of, my non-pitch doctor opinion, thought he looked good, thought he looked healthy, and I'm excited for another great year of Justin Steele. That was my main takeaway here.
Yeah, let's do the second ad break here. We'll come back around. I think we have a longer discussion just on Steele and the rotation in general, but I don't want to get too bogged down with a lot of the minutia. So let's take our second ad break here. I'll come back around. We'll show some graphs. And
before we do the ad break, I'm going to tease everybody and let them know that Brendan, 10 minutes before we were getting on the air for this show, was coding something about Justin Steele in the background. I could just hear him clicking away, and
people love my typing. They give me good reviews on that.
Yeah. So anyway, we'll hit our second ad break. We'll be back to talk about Justin Steele.
Okay, timeline. The cells in our bodies are the building blocks of life. Timeline is a supplement that works with those cells to help give you more energy, feel stronger during workouts, and preserve your health and mobility as you start to age. Monopure is shown to deliver double-digit increases in muscle strength and endurance with a change in exercise. It is a win. They have a patented ingredient, which is called MitoPure. They describe it as a postbiotic nutrient that clears out dysfunctional mitochondria, the cell's battery packs, those mitochondria. Right now, Timeline is giving you 10% off your order of MitoPure. Go to timeline.com/CHGO today to get started. That's timeline.com/CHGO. Mando is a men's deodorant brand that's hyper-focused on keeping every aspect of a man's body smelling fresh and clean. Yes, every aspect. It's created by a doctor who saw firsthand how normal BO was being misdiagnosed and mistreated. If you want to try America's #1 whole body deodorant formula right now, you can now find them in Walmart, Target, and other retailers across the country. And for the best deals, you can go to shopmando.com. So what makes them so unique from any other deodorant? Well, it's safe to use anywhere on your body, not just your armpits. It can be on your thighs, anywhere. Yes, anywhere. And you can choose from a variety of fresh scents like bourbon leather, cloverwoods, Mount Fuji, or Pro Sports. Try out Mando Starter Pack right now. It's perfect for new customers. It comes with a solid stick deodorant, cream tube deodorant, 2 free products of your choice like mini body wash and deodorant wipes, and best of all, free shipping. As a special offer for listeners, new customers can get $5 off this starter pack with our exclusive code that equates to over 40% off your starter pack. That code is CHGO. Use it at shopmando.com, SHOPMANDO.com. Please support our show and tell them we sent you there. Smell fresher, stay drier, and boost your confidence from head to toe with Mando.
All right, Brendan, talk to me about Justin Steele. What were you coding before this podcast?
Well, I was trying to fix my computer over here. I'm not coding, advanced stuff. I'm just trying to get my computer to stop freezing. So if you have any tips about that, let me know. I was looking at Justin Steele's slider, Corey. So over the years, we followed Justin Steele extensively. 2021, throwing the sinker, throwing a curveball. 2022, fastball shape changed to more of a cut right profile. He's talked most recently about throwing more changeups and sinkers. We did not see a lot of that in his first start. But what we saw differently, although it's unclear if it's intentional or if it's naturally part of how he's evolving, we saw a slider with more break. So if we look at how his slider looked in Japan versus how it looked last season, it's pretty obvious. So here's a graph on the x-axis, or on the horizontal portion of this graph. Anything to the right means it has more break. It breaks more inside of right-handed batters. The gray dots are every single slider he threw in 2024. The red dots are those sliders he threw in Japan. The first focal points that you want to look at is most of the gray dots were shifted to the left, did not have as much break as the red dots in Japan. Now, most of those red dots, while they look more break compared to last season, he still had starts in which he threw similar type breaking pitches. But if you look at just like the percentile distribution of those red dots, they fall within about the 80th percentile of breaking pitches he threw last year. So it's a trend. It's not to say, oh, his slider is different. Look out, it's looking way better. But it's a trend that maybe we should monitor. I have no idea if him and Hadavi and the guys are trying to change a specific shape or whatever, or if it's random. But given that it's the first game, and given that it was different in terms of where it landed last year, it just piques your interest. And then if you look at how he finished up last year, here's another graph looking at his horizontal break throughout time. So anything on the far right is his most recent starts last September. Anything on the far left is the March, April, May starts. The higher the line, the more horizontal break. The lower the line, the less horizontal break. So you actually saw throughout the year last year, his break went down. So most of it was even throughout the summer, but as he finished up last season in September, the break went down, which is in stark contrast to the break going up in that first start. So all this is to say is, although he walked 5 guys, I understand he gave up runs. It was not what we want to see Steele produce. The fastball looked familiar. The slider looked sharp. His velocity looked good. By the way, he struck out his 500th guy. That's a career milestone. And most importantly, he talked excitingly about his stuff, about where he's at right now.
Yeah.
And that goes with more of how he showed good stuff in early March and late February. So if he's excited, then there's no reason for fans to be disappointed, especially with what we saw in Japan with his stuff.
Yeah, he said he felt good, body feels good. And, he admitted, got bit by the home run ball. Again, he's not, I don't think, going to come out and say that the call before one of the home runs was terrible and it shouldn't have happened. But we can say that for him and remind everyone of that. But, we've seen starts like that from Justin before, where he looks really good. He strikes out a bunch of guys, doesn't walk guys, gets bit by a couple bad pitches. And, that's what happened. And again, like, even without their 2 best hitters, like, guys, sometimes you make mistakes. These guys in this Dodgers lineup, like, they're going to take advantage of it. So yeah, I thought both those starters looked good. And, for the 2 guys anchoring this rotation,
relatively good.
Yeah.
Right?
Not the results. Yeah. Not the results that you wanted, but for a start to begin the season earlier on, the normal timeline, I feel pretty solid about what we saw and, how it bodes for the rest of the season. So
all with the expectations that they just continue to get better and more
better. Yeah, right? Of course.
Because people are going to look at, like, 5 walks. And what are these idiots talking about? Like, Shota only pitched 4 innings. What the hell are they talking about? But relatively speaking, for an opening day across the world in mid-March, all things considered, not bad.
Yes, it looks like a good ramp up to a successful season.
Correct.
It's unfortunate that the ramp up counts, but it is what it is. We don't control that. So let's finish on the pitching, because we had the roster move today, and then we'll get into the offense to finish up the show. So the Cubs option Jordan Wicks and Eli Morgan, and it's something we talked about. Wicks still building up. I think, again, they're going to want to stretch him out, get him starts in Iowa, and we'll see when he gets back in the fold and how ultimately they want to use him. But it just seemed like on the timeline he was on, working back from the injury, the options that the Cubs have in this rotation and, on their roster, not ultimately a surprise that Wicks is going to be one of those guys that maybe they're kind of playing around with and, up, down in this role, in that role. And we'll see how that unfolds throughout the season. Morgan, again, we talked about that. We wondered if they would utilize that option. And you look back at the trade that the Cubs made, and, you can certainly assess that they made that trade not just for Morgan and for his ability that he showed at the MLB level, but because he was a guy with an option. They knew this was going to be a crowded group, and they wanted to give themselves flexibility in the event that throughout this spring training, you felt like guys who did not have options either made it so that you had to put them on the roster, or guys that didn't have options, you'd like to really hold on to as long as you can until you have no choice but to go the DFA route, which is obviously what we saw with Keegan Thompson. In Morgan's case, pitches in a decent leverage spot in that first game. And again, coming off, success at the MLB level. So this is someone who is obviously in their plans for the bullpen. They're just utilizing that roster flexibility to get a final look at some of these guys. And you might look at someone like Tyson Miller and say, given what we've seen recently, like you may need to really perform here in these first few weeks, or they're going to get Eli Morgan back up. And maybe it's not exactly who it is and how they go about some of the other guys that have options. The only thing I would say about that, Brendan, especially in Morgan's case, and I was reading over at bleachernation.com, I always say this, but apologies. It was either Michael or Brett, and I don't remember who wrote it, but it was good either way. So credit to both of them. And congrats on their new podcast, by the way,
Hey.
Friends of the show. Just made the point, and I don't suspect this. I imagine that their communication is good. But you hope that Eli Morgan's not like annoyed at this. Like he pitched well. He's coming off a successful season. And there is a human element to it. Like if you or I were in the situation, I don't think you'd want to be a, roster flexibility guy. Like you'd feel like you earned it and don't want to go to Iowa or whatever. Again, I'm not suggesting there's a problem, but it was just a point they made in the article that hopefully they have a good line of communication. Eli Morgan is bought in to the longer term picture. And I suspect that's the case, but it was just an interesting thing to think about. Cause like, as we were talking about it, it's easy for us to look at like the nice little spreadsheet list that you made with the colors and stuff like that. Oh, right on cue.
There it is.
Yeah.
Although Porter Hodge is not on this, so apologies to Porter Hodge. But there you go.
He's assumed.
Yeah.
But it is one of those things where you do forget, like, if I were Eli Morgan, you'd be like, well, great that I have an option. I'm better than the people you're keeping on the team. So fine, but let's deal with this quickly. But what did you think just about those, two decisions? Who were you looking at as kind of like, especially in like Morgan's case? And we expect Wicks up at some point too, obviously, to contribute to this team. Who are the guys that you're kind of looking at now, since we suspected they might utilize the options that were available? Like, hey, you're on kind of a thin rope. Like you either show up in these first few weeks or month of the season, whatever it is, or your opportunity is going to be gone.
Yeah, it's the guys who lack options. I mean, Keegan Thompson got DFA'd. I thought Keegan Thompson had enough stuff to at least maybe break the opening day roster, but obviously with Brad Keller making the team and his surgeons into the Cubs' plans change how Craig Counsell thinks about things. But you can also think similar about Tyson Miller, Julian Merriweather. You can think in a similar way as well. Guys simply without options. And I imagine the pitchers know this. This is not 2019 anymore. The AAA squad for pitchers is basically your major league reserve now. Yeah. It's unfortunate because if I were a pitcher, if I were Eli Morgan, I'm thinking, damn, I have to go ride the bus. I can't go play in major league stadiums. I can't get the quality food, right? I'd be a little annoyed about that, but I feel as if the realistic outlook is not one of surprise, because Counsell is likely communicating exactly the expectations.
Yeah.
And to tie this into how Craig Counsell communicates, after the first game, Matt Shaw makes his debut. Craig Counsell says, frankly, I didn't think he had good at-bats, and he just made his debut. So Craig is going to be fully honest with you. And of course, Eli Morgan's options are a significant advantage for the Cubs and why they traded for him to begin with.
Yeah.
So I think it's all made clear. I would love to see him up soon. I just think they're going to give the guys without options the first crack at this. And should they fail, it's going to be a fast turnaround.
Yeah. And look no further than the team that they just played as far as being as flexible as possible in options, putting guys on the injured list. Yeah. Like I think, organizations,
put them on the IL.
Yeah. Organizations at this point, I would think a lot of these pitchers understand it is going to take more than, as we always talk about, the 5 guys in that rotation, the 8 guys in the bullpen to get through the season. There's going to be some shuffling. You're going to have to be okay with being a part of the bigger plan, or it's not really going to work. So I think that's, as far as the pitching staff is concerned, I think that's enough time on them. Nothing really, stood out to me. It was good to see some of these guys, but, again, like it's so early in the season. We'll see how they develop and what they look like once we hit the ground running at the end of March here in Arizona.
I mean, a few other notes that just to finish up on the pitching side. So first and foremost, Ryan Presley. We talked about Ryan Presley and the velocity. It's like, oh, is the velocity a problem? He was throwing 93 in Japan. Last season, he threw 94. The previous season, he threw 95. So in just one outing, a few pitches, no reason to panic, he threw 93 miles per hour. One other note with Ryan Presley, slider usage was his dominant pitch type. So this is what he did in 2023. His slider was his dominant pitch type. He threw that pitch more than his fastball. Last season, for some reason, he reversed it. Fastball was his dominant pitch type. Slider was his secondary pitch. So in one outing, who knows? More sliders than fastballs. Fastball velo, a little bit lower, but older guy, Japan. It's the usage that we should pay attention to.
Yeah, and, again, first outing, but let's not walk 3 guys in an inning of work next time. If I'm just giving advice.
I mean, you and your walks, man,
What about it?
I get it. It's just like there's 2 things that piss Corey Freeman off. Number 1 is giving back the lead after scoring a run. Yeah. The second is walks. Those 2 things.
Lack of a shutdown inning there's nothing that drives me nuts more than that. Yeah, that is true. That is, I'm happy to wear the badge of honor that I don't like pitcher walks, I guess, if that's a bad thing. That's fine. I can wear that. All right, let's talk about the offense. So to me, again, look, if you watched the first game, Yamamoto is nasty. And at some point, if you want to be successful, you're going to have to do better work against good pitchers. You're going to have to grind them a little more than this Cubs offense did. You're going to have to cash in on some opportunities. But that doesn't change the fact that Yamamoto is a big talent, and he looked every bit of it in that game. Really, my main takeaway from this entire series, honestly, was that Dansby Swanson looks healthy. He looks good. I thought he had some good at-bats. Obviously, he has a hit in both games. But coming off a year where he really struggled at the plate for a significant amount of time and was dealing with the core injury, it was nice to just see him look good and start the year looking like he's in a good place. And hopefully we don't have quite such a big valley in his offensive production in this year. Other than that, I don't know that much really stood out to me in that first game. Obviously nice to see Miguel Amaya get that big hit, getting the opportunity, again this year to catch a lot of games for the Chicago Cubs, given his career, his injury history, etc. But, with the way he finished last year, to see him come in here, get that big hit, the only, RBI in this game for the Cubs, that was nice to see. And other than that, as you mentioned, I think interesting to look at Matt Shaw hitting in that 5 spot. That's certainly something that I think caught a lot of people's attention. We'll see where everything shakes out once Nico is back. Obviously, that's, certainly something affecting the lineup decisions. I liked it, though. I know there was some discussion about that. He came up in some big spots. I liked it. These are 2 games to start the year. Matt Shaw is not a guy you're looking at as a defense first. He's not PCA in that sense. PCA, you're dreaming on the bat. You've seen what he can do, but the main, headlines for PCA are the speed, the defense, and hopefully the bat comes along at the MLB level. That's not Matt Shaw. Matt Shaw, like, his highlight is the bat and what he can do at the plate. I kind of liked Craig Counsell showing the confidence and being like, go out there and hit, dude. It didn't work, but these are 2, games in Japan. It's a unique circumstance. I kind of liked the confidence. I kind of liked throwing the kid into the deep end. And, sometimes those decisions don't work. But I guess all I'm saying is when he came up in those big spots, I wasn't losing any sleep over like, they should have had a veteran hitting higher. They should have put him in the 9 spot. Now, how they utilize him the entire year, kind of a different discussion. I tend to like those guys hitting lower and having a little less pressure on them, like really easing in to the MLB level. But I think for these 2 games, for the spectacle of the games against the Dodgers, great pitchers, I kind of liked it. I kind of like Craig being like, go get him, kid.
Yeah, I liked it too. And there's a logic to Craig. He's going to balance the human
I would
side.
hope so. He'd be
He
very
is.
expensive
He
not
is.
having
But
any logic.
uh but I feel as if there's going to be more there is going to be a little bit more data driven decisions than what we've seen from recent managers like Joe Madden and David Ross. And that's not a bad thing in a vacuum. But I believe if we had to guess why Shaw was batting 5th, it is a personnel issue. And behind him, we had Birdie, not much power. Miguel Amaya, less power perhaps than Matt Shaw, and PCA less power than Matt Shaw. So I'm thinking that
he
with
was behind him in these games. I'm saying,
yeah, I know that's what I'm saying.
Oh,
so,
yeah.
So I'm thinking Craig Counsell wants to just give Shaw, because he's a power bat compared to the other guys, more opportunities. So it wasn't as if like, oh, I'm going to put this rookie in there and really give him a mental boost. Like I think Craig Counsell believes Matt Shaw's power potential was best served in the 5th spot.
Yeah, sure. It can be a combination of things, and maybe that wasn't his motivation. I'm saying just from a fan's perspective, I
loved it. Are you kidding? I would love to put these guys in the fire right away.
You're ready,
Yeah,
you may not think you're ready, but you're ready.
There's a part of me that wants to see PCA in the leadoff spot just because it's going to cause chaos. Like for real. I think I'm curious about the mental
to think
side.
about. If he were, put it all together at the plate, I do like Happ
every now and then.
I understand the sort of chaos theory, but Happ and his on-base ability is nice.
That's the balance of the data-driven and the human side. That's what, like Joe Madden batting Rizzo leadoff, right? Like Joe Madden batting Chris Bryant leadoff, and going crazy with some of these lineup decisions. Like I think that does have a little bit of a mental shift for the team and specifically for guys, and I like that. So that's why when I say, oh, let's see PCA bat leadoff every now and then, I think there's a chaos element that you just quite don't see with many guys.
Yeah. Just continuing on the offense, it will be interesting to see where Nico slots in when he comes back. Is Nico
probably lower in the lineup?
Is that 5 spot for him? Do we see different things? We'll see. I don't know.
He'll bat like at least 6th, 7th, or 8th. I don't think he's going to bat top 5. That's my guess.
I wouldn't necessarily think so either, but it's just curious to see how they massage Shaw's playing time and how he's making adjustments at the plate, etc.
As you think Birdie gets more chances at third base? Not to cut you off there, but I thought Birdie looked okay. The stolen bases were intriguing. Mm-hmm. I know he made an error at second base, but I think some of the contact ability and the chase rate ability and the speed, I could see situations where maybe they play him more third base than I anticipated.
And he did look. He did make good plays otherwise defensively.
Yeah, he made a nice diving spot.
That was the throw on the error. It's another one where it's like, you're yelling in the dugout, eat it, but he didn't eat it. He tried to make the throw and, you rush it and that's what happens. So, I don't know. That was, it sort of takes us back to those Alex Bregman discussions, and how are they evaluating Shaw? What do they think is the best approach for Shaw? If he starts the season and struggles, is the approach to just press on, keep adjusting like you're playing every day? Or do you get into a space where you're like, hey, you know what? We like this matchup better. We like this matchup better. We don't like this matchup. It's curious. And you go over the years and they've, this organization has developed different guys, different ways. So I think it's just something we're going to have to see how it plays out. The one thing I did like, and Craig Counsell pointed out, Matt Shaw, really, is the one play, but he really rebounded that next day defensively. And Craig Counsell spoke about that specifically while he was blunt about his, not great plate appearances. He also was straightforward in saying it was really nice to see him come back after making that, bad throw in the first game. It was a really nice play too. Like that's the thing about that, the spin to get that ball, try to make the throw. It's a nice play. He just didn't make a good throw, and another one you probably just shouldn't have thrown it. But nice to see him rebound that next day. Of course, this is a guy who's played different positions. There was a lot of talk of his defensive ability, when he was first coming up. Where would he play? This, that, and the other. And it was nice to see him, have a better game in that second day. That's all you can really ask for as a rookie. Just get better the next day. If you made a mistake, don't do it again. Try not to do it again. Try to get better. And I think that's what we saw from him. So other than that, I don't really know much else that jumped out to me from an offensive perspective. Obviously, it wasn't the series that a lot of these guys were hoping to have. It's a very good Dodgers pitching staff. And that might be the case every time they play the Dodgers, even, later in April when they're out in LA.
October as well.
Yes, right. When they knock them out of the NLCS.
Hey, you never know.
It's a very good pitching staff. So I think, as we go forward, offensively, I understand that a lot of people, probably have, they're getting a bit of a flashback looking at some of these box scores, in the opening game, 1 for 7 with runners in scoring position. In the second game, also 1 for 7, 11 guys left on base. You felt like you had Sasaki on the ropes, but you didn't really take advantage of that. And, of course, like it's been an issue for this team the last couple of years, and the 2025 Cubs are a different group, in some significant ways. And we'll see how they, are faring as the 2025 season actually unfolds. But that's, in that second game, that was the one thing, again, looking at the game in a vacuum, not drawing anything from it, for the whole season. But just, that was a game. You had a young pitcher. You had him on the ropes a few times, and you weren't able to take advantage of it. And it cost you. You only lost that game by 3 runs. And, look, you and I didn't spend any time on it because whatever. That bad umpire calls. Was it fan interference? Who cares? Like, they lost the game. Those calls are going to happen. They're going to go against you. They're going to go for you, whatever. But you did have him on the ropes, and you didn't take advantage of that. So that's one of those things as we go forward, like, got to cash in when you have runners in scoring position. You can't be leaving so many guys on base. It's just something that's plagued this team. And, they're not unique in that across Major League Baseball, but it's been a particular trait of the Chicago Cubs. We always joke, like, it's felt like for a long time, like they can load the bases with no outs, and you and I will text each other, like, how are they going to manage not to score here? Who's going to ground into the double play? Who's going to run on contact and get thrown out at home? And so that's just the type of stuff as we go forward, hopefully these box scores, and they will start to look a little different. And you're cashing in on more of those opportunities.
Yeah.
But anything else on offense that jumped out to you? Any players in particular or anything like that?
It's 2 games. You can't draw many conclusions from 2 games. Pitching's different. You're looking at fastball velocity and pitch shapes that are extreme differences. But for hitting, Dansby looked healthy, looked good. Kyle Tucker almost hit a home run. They walked several times, especially against Yamamoto in the second game, or rather Sasaki in the second game. So you want to see just more power overall, and I think we're going to get there eventually. Just the biggest takeaway for me from the offensive side was simply Matt Shaw batting in 5th. I thought that was very fun. Yeah, I'm curious to see if it continues. That's it.
I mean, it is fun. It is fun. You have a big prospect. They give him the opportunity, and, you want to see him succeed. So let's see what happens. To be honest with you, I thought possibly this was going to be like a 90-minute episode, but I think I think that's about it. And to be honest with you, I think it squares with how we started this show. It is not the opening day that we wanted. There was a lot of hype around this series, and it felt like a big showcase for the Dodgers. It makes me miserable to think about. But so be it. It's a bummer that those were 2 Cubs home games because they certainly didn't feel like it. And that's 2 less games at beautiful historic Wrigley Field that certainly will feel like home games. And it's a bummer that, they didn't get any wins. That we're sitting here. They're 0-2 for the next week, and we got to wait for them to open in Arizona. But ultimately, it was 2 games. It's early, and the season, as we all should know by now, but we all err and don't remember, it is truly a marathon and not a sprint. My feelings about their offseason didn't change. My feelings about the team don't change. It's 2 games against the best team in baseball in Japan. It is what it is. It was disappointing. So be it. onward and upward. We've got a long season to go, and hopefully the Cubs can make up those 2 banked losses in short order in Arizona. So Brendan and I will be back with you next week. We appreciate all your support. As I mentioned, check out Cody and Luke's interview with Ben Zobrist from earlier this week on the CHGO Sports YouTube. We appreciate all your support. And as always, go Cubs.
We all silly like the mayor.